Hey YouTubers, today I got something a little different for you guys. I always like to bring you different stuff so you never know what I'm doing next. But anyway, today we're going to talk a little bit about my sewing machine. This is a Consew cp206r. This is made in Japan. It's a small, lightweight, I guess kind of cheap sewing machine. It's not cheap by home machine standards. You know, this thing was about $400 when I purchased it about 6 years ago. But, you know, as far as walking foot sewing machines, it doesn't get much cheaper than this. The purpose behind a walking foot sewing machine is that both the bottom and the top of the presser foot move the material at the same time. So if you have multiple layers of material or you have a thicker batch of material to sew, what happens on a regular machine is that you would have the bottom foot would be dragging the material and the top foot would be skid. It would just skid along the material, and so you would find that the bottom of the material would move a little bit further than the top and move it out of register. With the walking foot, it eliminates that. It pulls the bottom and the top material at the same time, and so it gets you a nice even stitch when you have thicker material, or you might have 3, 4, maybe even 5 layers of material that you're trying to sew at the same time. The reason I'm making this video is because one of my followers on YouTube, thanks for following me. I'm not one of those YouTube people who's gonna spend a whole video saying click like and click subscribe and ring the bell and make sure you watch all my videos. I'm not doing all of that. If you're interested, cool. If you're not interested, that's okay too. You know, I'm doing this to help people who might be in a situation that I was in before, and that's pretty much the purpose of my videos. So anyway, one of my followers asked me about threading the machine. How I would thread the machine, and so I started typing a response, and once I started typing I realized that this was way more than I wanted to type, and in any case I could show you a lot better than I could possibly tell you. So here we are. I'm about to show you guys how to thread the machine and some basic setting up of the machine. Alright, on my machine, first of all, let me talk about this table. This is just a little desk that I purchased at the Salvation Army. So I cut out a hole in the bottom of the desk that was just the right size for the machine, just a little bit smaller than the base, and then the machine sits down inside of that hole, and that was just convenient for me sewing. There's nothing special about this table. This was, like I said, just a little $15 table, and I cut a hole in it, and then I set up an area for my thread right there. Now I have 2 spools of thread right there because my last project I was using some red and I was using some black, and then I have this wire which is bolted through the thing, and then it comes up and then the thread comes through here and then goes to the machine and then it feeds through. So I'm going to show you guys how that goes, and I'm also going to show you, now before I did all of that I had just a regular bobbin of thread like this, like you would buy in Joann's Fabric or something like that, and I had it sitting on top of here. Okay, so the explanation that I'm going to show you for setting the machine up is going to go through both setups. I mean, the only difference is that one of them is going to have the thread right here on the machine, which if you don't have this whole desk set up you would probably do it that way, and then the other one is going to be having your thread down there with the industrial size bobbins of thread. But pretty much the setup is the same. It's just your starting point for your thread is going to be slightly different from one to the next. Okay, so we're going to start with the basic of the basic of the basics. First of all, when my thread comes up here from the back and it goes through this loop right here and it comes to the machine. Now if I didn't have that set up, I would have a bobbin like this and it would be sitting on top of here, instead of having the thread go through this. Now, since I have the thread going through this, I'm going to pull all of this out so that I can show you guys step by step what happens. But so what I do is, now this little piece here, this is part of the machine that comes separate and you have to screw it on here. And so I put the thread through there one time, and then I put it back through again the second time, this time facing forward to where it's going to go next. Okay, so I have a gentle, and you don't want any tension on these things. This is just a guide so that your thread doesn't get caught up in your work or get tangled or anything like this. This area here is just to guide the thread. This is not creating any tension. You definitely don't want to wrap this around to create any tension or anything like that. Don't ever do that. It'll mess your sewing work up. It'll make the machine impossible to set up. Like, it'll sew fine one minute, then it'll sew like crap the next minute, and you'll never figure out why. You need this to be nice and loose, and it needs to be consistently that way. Then this is where your tension starts. So this little piece right here, this is a spring-loaded bobbin, and so we're gonna go around the front of it, like so, around the back. Okay, so it's coming in this way and then going around and coming forward, and then this little corkscrew, it just wraps through that corkscrew, like so. So now, it went around here and it went through this corkscrew hole. Now I could have just pushed it through here, but it's easier since it's shaped like a corkscrew to just do what I did. I'm going to show you guys again. So I had it, it went through here and around, and then through the corkscrew I just went under from the back and then come through the top, and that's it. So that is the first part of the tensioning. The second part of the tension is this little thing right here, and this actually swivels. Some people have it upright, some people keep it down like this. It really doesn't make that much of a difference so long as it doesn't create too much tension. You want a little bit of tension, but not much. So what I do is I go through here once, from there to there, and that is to guide the thread, okay? I'm guiding my thread with that, I'm not creating any tension, and then it comes back over and back down here. So, like that. So now it's looped around through there, okay? So we have a little bit of tension on the thread, but not much from this and this. This is where your main tension is. This is where you want to adjust the tension on the thread if you can help it. The rest of this is just a guide, okay? So what you're going to do, turning this clockwise adds tension, and then counterclockwise removes tension. And you don't need to turn this spring, this is spring loaded, you don't need to turn a lot to change the tension. You know, like a quarter turn or a half turn will actually make a noticeable difference. Now, the next part of this, I'm going to bring you guys in nice and tight so you can see what happens next. Okay, so the next part of this is the thread has to go back here, and it has to go between, you know, try to show you. Alright, so yeah, it focused. It has to go between this thing, these two spools, so it has to go between those, and then it has to come up and over the top of the back hook and under the bottom of the small wire hook. So really simple, we just go from the back, and once you get it between there, we pull it up and it goes over the top of the lower hook like so, and then under the upper hook like so. Alright, see that? It's on that hook. Now the next part is that it goes through this eye right here, and this pulls the thread up when you're sewing, and then it relieves the tension so that the needle can so that the shuttle can snatch the thread from underneath. And I'll show you guys what happens there in a minute, because I'm going to show you guys a little bit of the setup and what can go wrong. Okay, so now once we have the thread through this eye right here, the next part, you see that little, you see this piece that's right in front of the needle, this just this wobbly eyelet thing, and it's got a hole in it, and the thread goes through that hole from front to back. Really simple. And then, if I can get it, I'm trying to do this while holding the camera at the same time. But anyway, so now let's refresh. So now the thread has to go through this crack right here. Okay, so it went from here, it went through this small tensioner, through this corkscrew, down here, around once, down through the back of this, the bottom of that the top of that small hook, the big hook, the bottom of this spring-loaded hook right here, okay, this one right here, and then through this eye, it goes from this way to the outside, and then it goes through this eyelet from front to back, and then it goes through the needle from the outside to the inside. So it's gonna go this way. Okay, so it's gonna go from the outside of the needle, from the outside of the sewing machine towards the inside of the machine. So let me see if I can get that done without my glasses. Alrighty, that is that part. Now that we've done that, here is what happens underneath here. There's witchcraft that happens down under there. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to snatch this out and show you. So inside of here, this is called a shuttle, and then this is called your bobbin. And the bobbin, you have to reload this with the machine. The really nice big industrial machines, you can actually have this being loaded up while you're sewing, and so you can do both at the same time, and that way when this runs out, you just swap them out and keep going. The way I have mine set up, when I run out of thread, I actually have to manually re-spool one of these so that I can continue sewing. So I'm gonna take this off and then show you how this goes on here. Alright, so we have this bobbin and this shuttle. Let me get this into focus. Okay, and the thread on this, hold on, let me zoom out a little bit because I'm zoomed in too far to do this right. Okay, so the thread on this has to come out of this right here. You see right where that piece is right there? So what you do is you put this in, and you want, when you look at it this way, you want your thread to be reeling clockwise, so it has to be going in this way. Okay, now you can do it both ways, but I found that I get better results when I do it clockwise this way. So I take my bobbin and I put it in there, and then there is a slit right there, and so I pull the thread until it gets to that slit, and then pull it through, and it'll just snap into place. And you pull it, there it goes. So now, oh, hold on, it didn't snap into place. There we go. So now it's snapped into place, and see, it's coming out of this area. So now if I hold this up by the thread and let this go, it's hanging by the thread. If I pull this, it should have just a little bit of tension. I should just be able to pull it down by the weight of the bobbin. Okay, it shouldn't have much tension on it, but at the same time, if you do this and let it go, it shouldn't just fall. If it doesn't have enough tension, this little screw right here, you can tighten this up and it'll increase the tension, turning it clockwise. And then just the opposite, if you wanted to relieve the tension a bit, you could turn it counterclockwise, and you only turn it about a quarter turn at a time. You'll be surprised how much of a result you get just by a quarter turn. And then once we've done that, I'm going to cut this thread maybe about 4 to 6 inches long. Okay, and then it goes back inside. I'll show you. It goes down inside of here with this arm facing up. So when I put it in here, this arm is facing straight up, and we slide it so that the bobbin and the shuttle go in there, and then I can snap it in place. Now how it snaps in place, once I push it in to where it won't go anymore, once I push this in to where it won't go anymore, I pull this lever back just a little bit, and it'll allow it to snap in place, and then you let it go and it'll stay. And this keeps it from falling out, this little arm right here. So that's real important. When you're pushing it in, you pull this arm back, and once you've done it a few times, you'll actually pull that arm back without even thinking about it, and it just snaps into place and you let it go. So I put this in here, you hear that snap, and it's in place. I mean, it wobbles around a little bit, but that's fine. That is perfectly normal for the operation of the machine. And then once we have that set up, the machine is ready to sew. So I'm gonna zoom all the way out. What you want to do is you lower your foot, and then with the machine powered up, you can start sewing. I'm gonna show you guys real quick. Now this is beginner stuff that I'm about to show you here, okay? Alright, so real quick, I'm going to show you guys here with some spare material I have around. This is just a piece of vinyl with foam backing, and then this is a piece of plain vinyl with no foam backing. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew these two pieces together really quick, just so I can give you an idea of what a stitch is supposed to look like when it's properly done. This has some white stitching on it already. I could show you with that, but we're going to do this and show you real quick what happens, okay? Now, you put your material under there, make sure the thread is in the back, not in the front, and you start out slow. You know, even with me sewing as many years as I've been sewing, I start out slow. And then when you're done with your stitch, when you've reached the end of wherever you're going, you put it in reverse, go back about 4 stitches, and then come back forward to where you ended. And then when you want to pull the material out, what you do is you turn the head over here until the needle goes all the way up, and then as soon as it starts going back down, as soon as you see the needle starts going back down, you stop right there, and then you can raise your presser foot up and pull the material out. That's when there's no tension on the thread and you can pull it. If you do it in any other position, you'll have tension on the thread and you'll probably snap the thread, or you know, you'll just have problems when you're taking it out. Now, when you've done that, I'm going to show you guys what this stitch looks like. Actually, I'm going to have to adjust this because there's not enough tension on it. Okay, so the first time I did it, there wasn't quite enough tension on it, and so I'm going to do a second one. Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect. Okay, well that's really good because now I'm going to show you guys what happens when there's not enough tension and when there's just the right amount of tension. And the only thing that I did between the two of them was I turned this, it was like that, and then I turned it like that. So like I said, just a quarter turn will give you substantial results, noticeable results in your sewing. So if you see what I'm about to show you, you know what to search for. Okay, now my first pass was this right here, this one, and it looks perfectly fine. Okay, this was the top side, it looked normal, that looked like the way the stitch should be. The problem is that on the back side, when you look on the back side, you'll see that the thread isn't really pulling through on the back side. It looks like the bottom thread is just laying flat, and then the top thread isn't really pulling the stitch through, which you can see. Let me see. Yeah, you can see really good right here. You can see that thread, that stitch isn't very good. Like I could take a screwdriver and put it under there, under that stitch, and this loop isn't flat, it isn't flush. Now the second time, when I added a little bit of tension, okay, and that was this second pass right here, all I did was turn that tension screw in a quarter turn, and this is the result I got. This is what you're shooting for. This is a perfect stitch. It's nice and tight all the way around, and so the top thread and the bottom thread are pulling an equal amount. Now here's the thing with adjusting that stitch. You might have a perfect stitch for one piece of work, and then you add another piece of material, or you switch to a different type of material and it's completely wrong. You have to readjust it. So it's not one of those set it and forget it things, which is why that adjuster is right there front and center for you, is because you have to fiddle with that thing a lot, and once you've used it a lot and you use it a few times, you get used to it. And once you've sewn a little bit of work, you can see where you are and what you need to do, if you need to add tension or remove tension. If you add too much tension, it just bunches the thread up. It'll just make big knots on the back side of it, whereas if you don't have enough tension, like you saw, it doesn't pull the top thread up all the way, and so you end up with these let me see, I wish I could show you these things better, but those loose loops, you see how those are sticking up? That's what you don't want. That's too loose a tension on the thing. Now, real quick, I'm going to talk about the timing on the machine. I'm not going to go into depth on this because this would be something for a whole entire video on its own, but I'm going to show you guys the shuttle and the timing on it. Okay, and I'm going to show you where you would adjust the timing. This machine is such that, if you're sewing with it and something jams up or anything goes out of whack, the worst you're going to do is either this head is going to come loose, which this screw creates tension on this clutch right here. And so if you undo this screw like so, this head can turn and it wouldn't turn anything in the machine. These two are connected. So you'd have to tighten that in. So if you had really thick material and something jammed up, you might get that loose and the machine would act like it doesn't want to sew. Or if not, you might throw the timing slightly off, or you might bend, or worst case scenario, you might break a needle. There's really nothing you can do to break this machine per se. It's designed to be very robust. So that's something to keep in mind. So if you're sewing and you hear a funny noise and then it stops sewing, you probably have to look at something in the timing rather than panic and worry that you may have broken something, because it's not very likely that you did break something. Okay, so here's the underside of the machine, and I'm going to turn the head by hand so that you can see. So there are mechanisms down here that operate. This is the arm that goes up to operate the actuator for the walking foot mechanism on the top side. And then you have over here, this shaft goes over here, and then there are actuators. This operates, that yoke right there operates the mechanism for the bottom part of the walking foot that pulls the material from the bottom. And then around here we have the shuttle. And the shuttle, you would think that it goes in a circular motion, but it actually rotates back and forth. It goes in a semicircular fashion. And so what happens, I'll show you guys if I can. So this shuttle goes around, and then as that needle is coming down, that hook goes around the back side of it. And then what happens next is this arm right here goes down, relieves the tension on the thread, and then that hook snatches the thread from the needle. You see it right there? Here, let me see. It's right there. That hook snatches the needle, snatches the thread from the needle. See, it's moving right past the needle right there? That's the action that you want. And when it does that, it snatches the thread and then pulls it all the way around to the bottom of the shuttle, and then the tension just kind of pulls it back up, and that's what creates your loop stitch. Okay, now your shuttle comes out. That's that. Now in the back, let me see if maybe you can see that. Okay, all right. Yeah, that might be a little bit better. So your needle, let me see if I can get something small to point at the needle. All right, so this is your needle right here, okay? And then what happens is, as the needle is coming up, you see that hook? That hook right here, that hook right there snatches the thread from behind the needle and then pulls it around, and that creates your lock stitch, your loop lock stitch on there. Okay, so if you ever have a situation where it simply isn't grabbing the stitch, like you're just not getting a lock stitch no matter what you do, and it's because you think you may have snatched something out of time, you definitely want to look under there and make sure that you're getting that action where you see that hook, where that hook is just passing right behind that needle. You know, I'll bring the needle up so you can see. I don't think it'll focus that small. I think it will. Okay, but your needle has an indent right where the hole is, right along here. Okay, so it's concaved on towards the inside when you're putting your needle in your sewing machine. So it's concaved in like this, and that hook goes right past that concave indent on the needle, and it snatches the thread from that space. So you want the timing so that that hook is passing right where that space is, right where that indent is on the needle. I wish this thing would focus better, you know, but it's not really designed for this work. I'm just doing the best I can. So you really want it to be right there. So if for any reason you ever throw things out of whack and you're trying to get it back like that, you know, you want to do that. And so here are the adjustments. I'm going to go over these really quick. They're simple. It's a pain in the butt to get them right. Now, what happens is this piece is synchronized to this shaft. So if your rotation is off as far as snatching the thread, then what you would want to do is you want to loosen this screw and the one down here, and you want to rotate that so that the hook is right in place as that needle is about to come up. If it's too far forward or back, your thrust is adjusted by this, and this takes off the end plate. Like, you don't want any end play on the shaft at all. You want enough end play to fit a razor blade in the back there, and that's it. Okay, if you have room for a razor blade to fit in there and it'll fall out, you have too much end play. If there isn't enough end play to put a razor blade in there, then there isn't enough and things will bind up. But you see how that razor blade goes in there and it's stuck? That's the amount of end play that you want on this shaft. You don't want it to move back and forth, because then what will happen is sometimes that hook will be right in place for the needle. Sometimes it'll be too far away to snatch the thread. And then sometimes the needle and the hook might be in the same place at the same time, and you might end up breaking or bending a needle because that hook hit it. And the problem with that is, yeah, you can replace the needle, but then you also have to take this part of the shuttle out and make sure that hook is really smooth. I mean, that thing needs to be smooth like glass, because if there's any snares or any kind of burrs on it, it'll keep snapping your thread. It'll snap your thread all day, and you'll be frustrated and you'll never know why. Also, while I'm under here, this machine recommends oil. It recommends oiling, and I do oil it. But wherever you see a yoke, so you see this is a yoke, and it's operating this cam, and I'll turn it a little bit so you can see. You see that motion? Okay, that's a yoke. You see this yoke, and it's operating this shaft, and I'll turn it so you can see. Same thing over there. And then you see over here, you see that yoke, that's for the lower foot of the walking foot, and you see how that one moves. All of the yokes on this, instead of oiling them, I put wheel bearing grease on them. They work the exact same way as the oil does, but it stays on there a lot longer and it gets better protection. So the other parts, you know, the connections like this, and where this retainer is and things like that, you can put oil on those and they'll be perfectly fine. Okay, but wherever you see a yoke, because there's so much movement going on and there's actually loading of metal on metal, there's stress on it, then you definitely want to put wheel bearing grease, because then it tends to protect it a little better. It lasts a lot longer, and to me it just makes the machine run smoother. Okay, so that's your basics on setting up the machine and running your machine. Good luck with it. I've had this thing, like I said, I've had it over 6 years. It's probably been about 7 years. I've had This part break on me. I had that happen to me within the first 2 weeks, and I actually made a whole new one with some parts from the hardware store and welded it together and made a whole new one. Haven't had any problems with it since. But other than that, the machine has been, 100%. Like I said, the tension might go out, or the timing might change from time to time. But as far as reliability of the actual mechanics of it, I've had absolutely zero problems.